Hello and welcome to the EchoChamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves, and today we are talking celebrities, Martin. Celebrities. We're in the presence of multiple celebrities, actually. As usual, I'm joined by my co-host, and the man it's now safe to reveal that put a big no on Ben Bulben. Father Martin McMahon. What was that all about?
Yeah, you can see me climbing lovable. All right. Yeah, you know that's not true.
You put the bull in the field, was it? But more importantly, we're delighted to be joined in the Tortoise Shack by Impressionist, Columnist, Satirist, and President of the Patrick Cabinet Society, Oliver Callan. Oliver, how are you?
Sounds like a gag when you put it like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you know.
Now, what was going on with the microphones? Are they both? These two are on. But you're sitting over there.
Yeah.
See,
Sorry,
you pick up his voice
putting my
from
studio
about 100 yards away.
Gobby Groves.
So there's no need for the echo in the echo chamber if you just actually sat near the mic. It turns out. From a studio nerd point of view, it's mad not to be wearing headphones, first of all, but to have two mics close to two of us, and the third, Tony, you're over there.
I'm away from you because of what the Gardaí said as a warning that I couldn't get it that close to you. I didn't want to go total fanboy.
So when Terry McMahon was here, Terry McMahon could reach across the room and grab him by the throat from any distance. so he was moving himself.
No, the best, we had Brendan Ogle in, and Brendan actually has hands bigger than shovels, and he just waved his hand in my face, and I was pinned against the wall. So now I sit over here.
You used to do that there, now you used to. Well, I'm from up that neck of the woods, and you kind of, I can't hear his voice without having Dundalk kind of wash over me.
Yeah.
You know, and Dundalk is one of those special places.
Oh, it is, yeah.
I kind of love Dundalk.
I like the chip van at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Outside Ridley's.
Outside Ridley's, hey.
Oliver, I know, right, okay, so the whole country's come out of the repeal thing. We've all, and I don't want to, and that sounds dismissive to say the repeal thing, but it's not meant in that way. I just mean, we're coming out of it, and we're looking at it now already as, what's going to come, what's the next big push.
Yes.
I know you've done a lot of political satire, we'll say, and we've had some really great stuff, but I want to ask you,
and none of it works.
Yeah, that's my point.
The question?
The satire paradox that they talk about quite often is the fact that people who are satirized actually are more, can actually find, they benefit from it. People go, they recognize themselves in it. And
I definitely don't think they benefit from it anymore. But I think maybe we think satire is supposed to achieve something different to what it actually does. I mean, if you set out that satire is literally just, it's like this kind of addition to journalism. It's that little bit of extra stuff. So you're trying to inform through entertainment, and you're able to kind of ask more kind of questions from a higher vantage point than most journalism, because journalists just have to kind of go with the flow. And there was a lot of discussion as well of how a lot of journalists actually missed the whole repeal movement happening under the surface. And why was that? Because they're kind of, they're in and out of Leinster House. They are in a bubble. And they have to be in a bubble because they're supposed to get, the stories, and they're supposed to be informed by politics. Yeah. So they can't just, suddenly decamp for 6 months and just tour the country, while still keeping in touch with what happens in Leinster House. So we think, satire is kind of breaks through that vantage point and looks at it through a different prism. And I think when it kind of raises questions about how politics and how the country is run, I think it does kind of work in a way. Somebody said to me recently that the way Callan's Kicks portrays Sam Coveney has sort of started to catch on as he's kind of dithering.
I just don't know what to do
with myself. And even after the whole repeal movement, and I remember a week before repeal, there was quite a long and intrinsic interview with Mary Regan that conducted in the Sunday Business Post. And she was sent out, well, she wasn't sent out, she'd gone out to canvass with Micheál Martin and Simon Coveney. And at the last minute, Simon Coveney decided, no, I prefer you don't come watch me knock on doors. And Micheál Martin obviously let her.
Yeah.
And this was in the same constituency down in Cork. So it's the same dithering, kind of watery, that Simon Coveney's persona seems to be built around. And his whole thing, he was obviously campaigning for a yes vote, but he still didn't agree with 12 weeks, or did he? It was really unclear from up to a week before polling where this guy stood on anything, and he hasn't really. He's been missing. I think
loads of these people had a crisis of conscience.
Yeah,
they had to go on a journey.
Yeah, but this is still going on today. It's free vote because it's a really personal thing for a TD. It's like, they're kind of personal views, but they are public representatives on an issue that's no longer a little private thing. It is full when it's a referendum as a 2-year constitution. I think they should spent a little bit more time, vetting out their constituents on the issue. But a lot of them, I suspect, probably did just that. Because if you match the rural constituencies to the ones we all expected, including myself, I thought Kevin Monaghan would be a resounding no. You can see the TDs up there went, fully for the no side, like Brendan Smith and Fianna Fáil, who also opposed equal marriage, but didn't campaign for a no vote. So they don't even have the courage of their convictions in a lot of cases. And Heather Humphreys, who I would have thought would have had to kind of go for a no, because she's from the conservative North Monaghan Presbyterian Protestant but kind of culture, but she actually backed a yes vote and probably thought she was going to be harmed as a result. But it turned out she backed the wrong side.
There was a really interesting post I saw by Luke Wing Flanagan in relation to that, where he said his daughter had got in touch with him and said, "Daddy, you're going to lose your job." Yeah. Because he was the only person in Roscommon that actually, the only other person was not actually a TD. It was Sinn Féin's nomination in the upcoming election. Everybody else went no. Yeah. And, it was kind of unusual in that. And then when Roscommon passed it, people were going, okay, so it was one in the eye for a lot of the politicians.
I think so. And Dennis Naughton, who's cabinet minister, he didn't actually commit either way. He was one of the 15 TDs, I think. He just wouldn't say.
Several played that role, but if I can take that though back to the satirical eye on it, you're able to then point to the inadequacies of what political discourse is there just by actually playing with the medium. And you made an interesting point about the media being, say, captured by Leinster House. Yeah. And that's true. There's no doubt they have to be close to the seat of power if they're going to get, if they're going to give you the line. Yeah. But it also does mean that when you do your, we've often referred to your show as the hardest hitting news and politics podcast in the country. but when you talk about it in those terms, I think then that there's an element of, when Bertie Ahern was all the rage, that he became a fluffier, friendlier Bertie.
Definitely. There are some characters that seem to benefit from lampooning, and it does kind of take the edges off them. I mean, even I think our cartoon president, the Stephen Colbert created version of Trump, makes him look cute and cuddly because it's a cartoon version. And a lot of certainly the initial mimicking of Bertie, just because you kind of lean towards the stereotype. But if you let the character create the stereotype first, then they have control of the message. So all you can do is kind of just reflect that. Whereas good satire will kind of take the truth, the kind of hard truth out, and exaggerate that bit. So Leo is quite a cartoon figure, but it's kind of this simmering Thatcherite business that kind of parades itself as cool, liberal, acceptable, Justin Trudeau, kind of keep it nice and shallow and keep everything quite cool. A bit like Boris Johnson. If you make fun of Boris Johnson on his terms, as a wow, you lovely ipso facto, full mondeo cornetto, then you make him more charming. Whereas you've got to kind of ignore the caricature they've created and create your own version.
And I know, and that's why it's so effective, because you can actually point to the awkward moments when you had Leo doing a press conference, say, and the questions are actually genuine questions about a housing crisis, and Leo's answering a different question altogether. Yeah,
and we know frequently does.
But I suppose that's not really his fault if we can't hold him to hold his feet to the fire sometimes.
That's true. Yeah. I think the biggest thing he benefits from is probably the fact that the Fine Gael government he leads is kind of doing nothing. Enda Kenny was constantly in trouble because, in fairness to him, they were constantly passing laws, creating horrible quangos like Irish Water. When you're doing stuff, you're in trouble because somebody somewhere doesn't like it, and you're going to make mistakes because you're so busy doing lots of different things that the Troika are making you do. Whereas when Leo took over, look at the past year, he made one very good decision, which, is the repeal referendum, and it was a risky one. He couldn't have said back in June last year, what a great decision to make.
Yeah, but nonetheless, he could have kicked for.
People have been trying to force that hand for a very long time. Enda had kicked the can down the road with the Citizens' Assembly, which produced the result he didn't want. Yes. And then they tried to, let's have a big committee now, let's go on and kick it further down the road.
And it bloody well gave them the result they didn't want again.
Yeah. And it would have taken longer probably if Enda was still over that system. because look how long the banking the banking inquiry took. Even setting the thing up and trying to agree members. But anyway, Leo, I think, does deserve credit for pushing that through, because he couldn't have known this was going to be the result. Nobody did. No one, even on the repeal side, knew. But the fact is, they've done so little that you can't be in trouble, because all you're doing is you're going around touring the country talking about the British problem and the Brexit issue.
It's kind of a hark back to the yuppie days, where they're just all hanging around like coffee shops and wine bars, and going to work for a few minutes and make loads of money.
I don't know. I think what we've seen, though, in terms of we heard Mary Lou talk this week saying, it's new politics because they all got together on this one social issue. I think I think she's wrong there. I think that was just something that obviously had shown that the wider public were ready for when you look at the actual result. Now we know that. Wise after the event, albeit.
As Claire Daly said, nobody in the Dáil led on
She was fabulous yesterday in her speech, which
had to be forced along.
What was she said? She said, in fact, she was pushing a boulder up in the hill and half of you were sitting on the boulder. That's she said, and I think Kate O'Connell was only short of standing up applauding her from the opposition bench, from the government benches.
And Leo has particularly been slow, because almost everything that's happened in terms of social change in Ireland has been the antithesis of where he began.
Yes.
It all had to involve him, having this personal crisis that he had to,
he had to go on a journey,
come out and having read the focus group report.
And seen where the demographic votes are going.
Having spent 4 times more than any previous government on communications, he arrived at his own.
Because in 2011, when Fine Gael came in with and Labour together in this huge majority, there were figures in cabinet pushing for equal marriage, and they were James Riley, Francis Gerald, I don't think may not have been in cabinet at the time, and Alan Shatter, and none of whom got any credit in the end. And the person who reputedly was silent at the cabinet table on the issue was Leo Varadkar, who, Well,
he had gone on record previously and said that he wasn't in favour of it.
He was actually opposed to it. And worse than that, there's a clip someone had sent me on Twitter back in the day, or back when Leo first became Taoiseach last year, where he literally used the words which became the No Sides campaign, that he thinks, every child should have a mother and a father.
Yes, that's right, he did.
Opposed to gay adoption, which I don't know what the case is now. I mean, that hasn't moved on in any way, has it?
As far as I'm aware, I don't think there's been any legislation change.
Focus group, so we don't know which way he's going to go.
But look, he is someone who has potential to do something, and I think part of the problem is that we, as a citizenry, don't really push our politicians to do that. We just kind of sit around and complain, and people forget to lift the phone and actually make them to do. When you actually ask a TD to do something, they will start to think, well, I've got to do this. This is my job, because people are going to be upset. And it's kind of a positive selfishness on their part, because they know if we have to do this in order to actually get to keep our seats.
Well, we had some.
We don't push. I think we're the worst in the world for forcing our politicians to do things.
Well, we had Simon McGarr on. Simon has a few great techniques to put pressure on TDs, and the one is that you all arrive at a TD's constituency office on the same day, and if 10 people turn up on the same day trying to talk the same issue, then you've made a difference.
He said you can get 10,000 people to sign a petition. You get a tenth of them then to write a letter. And then he said, but more powerful than that, if you just got 10 people just to show up one day. He said, there's no way a constituency offices, if they all say single topic focused, watch that get traction within. And he's right, because as you say, we're very polite about, look, he's grand. He's grand. I don't like what this, or we're still struggling with the housing issue, but he's only one cog in the wheel.
That's right. And the housing issue, we'll come to that in a second, because I think that's a whole other kettle of fish. I suppose the big question you asked at the start was, what is the next issue? It should be housing, but getting citizens active and unified on the issue is going to be the difficult thing. But I mean, we have clinics in Ireland. We have these constituency clinics, but people only go for individual concerns and rather than as a group. And kind of, well, let's do this together. And worse than that, it's always a very local issue, because how do you get a national cause to kind of, arrive at local constituencies for national issues? No one is showing up going, you really need to do something about the health crisis right now, and that's all. It's like the lamppost outside, or they're charging for parking here, or the rates in Dunleary,
they haven't
need broadband in Roscommon.
They tarmac them over my double yellow lines outside, No, it is though. No, you're right. There still is a huge element of
But I also have to say that access to politicians is unique to us. That where you can act. I mean, on Saturday, I was at Dentally at a Count Centre, and we all went for lunch, or, quick coffee in the middle of it all. So I'm sitting at a table with Sinn Féin candidates, with Regina O'Doherty, with ex-Labour people.
So cabinet ministers.
And you're just sitting down and having a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and he just wants to name drop.
Well,
you better come up with a better name dropping than Regina.
Yeah.
But that
it's Ashburn, Oliver, okay?
Sorry, now it's suddenly clear, yeah.
But the access is unparalleled.
So of all the issues in the world that you could put to Regina Doherty, what did you decide to?
Oh, Regina knows my issue. Focus self-employment non-stop, and I will not stop.
Let's face it was really, what do you think of the cheese in the sandwich? Was
Yeah.
Well, we did actually talk about sandwiches.
but there is okay. So we can talk about housing and how you magnify it. But you made the point downstairs that what was powerful in the repeal movement was the actual stories. It's actually shown that the stories made the difference.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, it was never to do with the statistics and playing to your base. It was when people are confronted with this human issue of, women who are in a difficulty, they have a decision they don't want to have to make, but we're kind of forcing them to make the decision for them in a way that doesn't affect our lives back. And that's really kind of, I think, what swung it in the end. And just this whole idea, let's not judge. I know it's been interpreted as a big, swing against the Catholic Church, but that swing has been there going for a generation now at this stage. It was mostly to do with women specifically and just, removing our judgy fingers from the issues, wasn't it? So no, it was a good day, but I understood the kind of column. I can't remember who wrote it. It was Ro McDermott in the Irish Times. Said she felt kind of sad, and everyone was telling her, "You're a feminist. You should be delighted." And she was now going out. People telling me how to feel. And initially, I thought that's quite a pessimistic view, but I could understand. Yeah, there is a kind of an element of, why did it take us so long to get here? And we're now talking about adoption issues and illegal adoptions and non-adoptions, and thousands of people affected from the 1950s into the stretching into the 60s.
Yeah.
And but it's so easy for us to kind of have this bogeyman of the church, like as though anyone who was involved in the church or who was a cleric had a separate DNA to the rest of the good people. There was the good and the bad people. That was just Irish people who.
But none of it existed in isolation. None of it existed. I mean, the clergy worked with the Gardaí, worked with the state, worked with the homes.
Yeah. And worked with the parents as well.
Absolutely.
There's a collective, the reason the term collective responsibility exists is because there has to be some sort of collective responsibility.
Yeah, but we're not confronting our history by just saying, that was the church and the nuns.
I agree with you
it's quite not dissimilar to Nazi Germany in a way, because you had good people, who were just, though no one was putting a gun to their heads, telling them to, do all these horrible things. It was just, this is our culture. Let's just get along with it.
Well, I mean, I'm not old enough to remember. My dad would remember where kids would be told, if you're bold, you're going to the industrial school. So at some level, people absolutely knew what was going on.
But that was like Gary Gannon used to get told that, and Gary's younger than me, Martin. So the last woman escaped from a laundry in 1994. So
that's right.
So like she ran away.
The guards were chasing her.
Yeah,
to put her locker back up.
So it's this sort of crazy stuff. But again, in the wider society, you're walking by that place, and for someone to say, if you're bold, you'll go there. We knew, knew. It wasn't just the women inside the doors who knew.
Don't like rattling cages, and you have to ask, what kind of cages are we still afraid to rattle? Well, and, I was talking to my sister just before the vote, actually, because she was talking about voting yes, and she had a crisis pregnancy herself. But we were talking about, like, when we were kids, there was a member of the clergy who had come to the house, and he ran the running school that my sister was a part of. And, at this stage, she's 12 or 13. She's not, like, in our heads, we're not little tiny kids, but he was still coming over, meeting my parents and insisting that she sit on his knee. But we knew as kids instinctively, this is a bad guy and you stay away from him. And we would be the protector. And I was younger than my sister. Come on out, and play out here. And we just couldn't. We talk about it with our parents now. Like, how did you not know? We were kids. We didn't even know what sex was. We knew nothing about, certainly, abuse. We just knew instinctively, you stay away from this chap. But my parents were totally oblivious. He was a nice old man in a cardigan who was helping the kids in the area.
We had one of those in school. We used to, and this is true, absolute true story. We used to call him Father Feeler. All the kids called him Father Feeler. I swear to God.
Yeah.
And he eventually got hooshed out of the school.
Moved along.
Yeah, and he did get moved along and hooshed out of the school.
So, I mean, look, we didn't have gas chambers and, murder millions of people, but we do have a version of a Holocaust in that, that we were selling children abroad
but again,
burying them in septic tanks and shooting. So
well, again, that's, a lot of stuff, as you said, we don't like to rattle cages in Ireland. The dogs on the street know about the illegal adoptions. We've all known for 40 years that illegal adoptions went on. And now suddenly, and I know people have written about it previously, and now it's breaking again like it's a new story. It's not a new story. It's the same story we've known all along. And it's just another generation's being introduced to this new story. But we all knew about this going back years.
I wonder, is there anywhere in our syllabuses in schools that is actually teaching this new history we suddenly realised? I mean, even when I was doing the Leaving Cert, which is almost 20 years ago, history went up right up to the 1960s. You're doing that Ireland since 1870.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, that whole period now has to be
actually
rewritten.
They've solved that whole problem because they're just not going to teach you history anymore.
The junior cert level.
The most important thing you could learn. We'll wipe your memory.
But this is how they do it in Germany. They just taught the history really, really strongly to their kids, and this is the kind of you now go off and seek forgiveness from the world.
And the Dutch do the same. They own their part in their partaking in. I had a Dutch historian tell me the reason they were so. I think they got rid of nearly 90% of all Jews in Holland at the time and they said because the real reason is because our civil service was so efficient. We knew where everybody was, and he said literally it was Dutch efficiency that knew exactly where people were and how to go and get them. And when the Nazis took over, they left the civil servants in place and said, right, here's your role. And these guys just knew their jobs. So as you said, good people did awful things. But I remember walking by a building in Amsterdam, and the guy pointed out and said, see that symbol? I said, yeah, that's the East India Trading Company. Yeah, most of this road was built out of slavery. And I thought, imagine someone telling you that in Dublin, see this building? Yeah, no, see this area in Tuam? Yeah, septic tanker. It's not.
Yeah, we don't. The IFSC. See this area here? Built on the tears of Irish people.
Yeah.
You can't.
I mean, we still have grottos and Our Ladies all over the country, but there isn't a monument anywhere for any of the poor kids.
Well, Gary Gannon was pressing hard to have the last Magdalene home turned into a museum.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's still in the mix.
But even if you listen to Catherine Corliss, there hasn't even been an apology.
No.
For Tuam, still no official apology. And we might get it in August.
I'm kind of amazed that the UN hasn't yet stepped in.
I don't think so. That's gonna be a very interesting time. I'm planning on getting out of here when that happens. I don't want to be around for the.
You have the irony of all the pro-repeal people being criticised for celebrating in Dublin Castle.
Yeah.
When they're all going to party in Croke Park. To celebrate as Mary McAleese calls it, the empire of misogyny.
Yeah, well, and €20 million spent on it apparently.
And there have been people who call themselves feminists who have been fundraising for this visit in the middle of the repeal movement and campaign.
I'd be interested to see do the same numbers come out as the last time the Pope was here.
No, there was 1 million people the last time, Martin. You won't.
1 million people.
Yeah, no, I was one of them.
Were you really?
I was, yeah. I was a little
My parents were one of them.
I was a little chiseler.
But they just said it was a great day. It was like their kind of
we had a picnic.
day trip to trip.
Yeah, it was Fela.
They couldn't hear a word the Pope was saying. They were all just having the crack in the grass.
You were corrals. There was corrals, and they called them corrals, and we were all corralled in corrals. And we had picnics, and everybody was chatting to everybody else. And then way off in the distance, you just saw this tiny little figure. And then this little Pope mobile drove up and down along the and that was it. And we all went home.
And then 9 months later, lots of little John Pauls running around. What were the girls who were born from?
Probably Mary's.
What were they? Mary?
Yeah.
Mary Paul.
Yeah.
And the boys also got Mary as the middle name.
But it is like okay. We do. I want to go back to we've gone away from housing. I want to get back to
it.
Yes. No, because it is the actual. It is
Home is a major issue.
Yeah.
I think it's very important issue. I'm very concerned. You can tell I'm concerned because I'm using the hand movements, which are very important. Tony Blair's school of hand movements. It's very important. I feel I'm frowning strongly, and I've done a lot of things for the homeless.
You haven't got your sleeves rolled up.
Sorry, yes. I've grown a beard to make myself look more homeless. So that's number one. we're working at number 2 and that'll be part of the next program of government.
Because, and the
Minister for Hotness.
high fives. No, what was it? Minister for high fiving Leo.
That's a good line. Do we use that line?
No.
No, that's ours. Copyrighted.
I'm taking that.
But
Stealing that.
He's
If I admit to stealing it first, it makes it okay.
Listen.
Common cause.
He'll but we do have to. You do have to wonder about a government that is in power since 2011.
I know.
That hasn't actually grasped the nettle of homelessness at all. Not just homelessness. People with rental vulnerabilities, precarious rental situations, upward rents that are going out of control, and then we have no local authority housing, no social housing, no proper affordable housing schemes. There are solutions that are actually workable solutions, and we're stuck with people who want to build student accommodation that they can charge.
We haven't even admitted, though, what the cause of the problem is. Have you ever heard a Fine Gael minister sit down or even be asked, why is there a housing crisis? They're not even asked that anymore. So instead you get Murphy, having a fight with Eoin O'Brien about statistics because, he wants Sinn Féin and the opposition to talk about statistics because that turns off the viewership, anyone at home. But I think, there's so many problems to do with housing, but I think the general population feel it is more to do about the affordability of houses for people who work as opposed to homelessness. I think homelessness in people's heads are just people who sleep on the Liffey boardwalk, who made bad decisions in their lives, who didn't do their homework, and now they want free everything.
Remember the old Batman? He said she came from a broken home. At the end of every Batman episode, there was always a forgiveness.
But that narrative has taken hold so much. Did you actually have people who are actively working in supposedly solving the problem of homelessness are so brave that they're using that language now. People who with a lifetime of bad decisions. This was the Dublin housing
executive. It's that was Eileen Gleeson, and that was an absolutely a low point in terms of the language.
Yeah, but very little scolding. Most people were kind of probably nodding along with that, going, "Yeah, that's fair enough."
A lot of people said, she has a point.
Shoot something up your arm. Why should we be giving you a free house? You're not going to be able to hold on to it.
And again, we come back and this fallacy of the free house, and it's nobody gets a house for free. And let's just put that out there. Everybody who gets a place pays rent in the place. I mean, that's it. There's no such thing.
But they're paying the rent from their social welfare, so it does fit into that whole welfare cheat us all. But they're all getting free everything.
But it's not. The landlord's getting paid. All they've done is stick the tenant in the middle and say, we'll pass the money through you to the landlord. Then it's you getting the money for the landlord. It's not us paying the landlord. And what HAP is really doing is moving state wealth to private landlords. It's simply a transfer of wealth from the taxpayer to private landlords, and it's going to be one of the biggest payments by 2022.
The real issue around HAP, and I mean this in someone just as talking pure financial sense, is the average HAP is, 69,000? Oh no, sorry, the cost of putting people in emergency accommodation is 69,000 a year, and you can build a 3-bedroom home for 163,000 through the O'Cool and cooperative. So they can do it so if you 3 years of someone literally waiting for a social house, we can afford to build them at the same thing. It's economic lunacy doing it the way we're doing it.
Yeah.
HAP is necessary if you want to keep the patient alive. If someone is literally at the precipice of becoming homeless, this is it's supposed to be an emergency payment, not the default solution. And it has become the default solution. And it means that the private landlord then, the person who's going to come homeless who has HAP is competing with someone in the private rental market, and it just drives rents up further because, you can get more.
Again, kind of understanding the problem and a lesser kind of quoted stat, which covers Enda Kenny's entire period in office and Leo Varadkar sitting in cabinet, whose collective responsibility for the decisions made between 2011 and 2016, the level of homelessness in Ireland doubled. And this is, starting a couple of years after the crash. So, it doubled. And why did it double in that period? When the state, through NAMA and the IBRC and, our shares and banks, owned more property, I'd say, than in the entire history of the state, easily. And we just, we went in there, Michael Noonan went in there. Okay, it was kind of pushed by the Troika, but he individually made the decision, and the cabinet made the decision that we've got to have a fire sale to take the sting out of our austerity budgets, to just sell everything at the bottom of the market. And the only people in the world who could buy them at that time were huge we call them vulture funds, but they're kind of investment vehicles, but they don't build anything. They sit there and they wait for the
SPVs.
So they knew that they were the only, they sold them they could have sold them at small portfolios, but they decided to sell them at bigger and bigger, and they were pushing NAM and so on to do that, which is why NAM is, going to turn a ridiculous profit of $3 billion on.
But you've got to measure that against that. It's not really profit.
But in terms of the rent crisis, then we did the same thing. We sold apartments in enormous batches. So you've got these kind of, and I know I'm coming from the Rory Hearn school.
Yes,
he's taught us all of this stuff. You got these REITs, and they're so unashamedly REITs, real estate investment trusts. They even put it in their own name. So IRES REIT come in and they're building up 5,000 apartments. If you're a landlord who owns 5,000 apartments in a city, you can obviously,
dictate the market.
You can dictate the market. And if you only have 2 apartments next door, you're not going to stay at the same level you were. You're going to have to compete with these guys and go, right, well, the rent is going up as well. And that's the problem in a nutshell.
But if you do that and then
building.
Let's imagine the REITs.
Sell everything to the landlord.
Imagine the REITs were grand and performing. But you turn around and say, okay, you're coming in here, so you're a REIT, you're an actual investment, so there's no real investment in financial terms that's less than sort of 5 to 10 years and medium. Like 5 years is considered short term in an investing structure.
Yeah.
So you want to turn around with something like that. You say, okay, so every tenant gets a 5-year security on there, as opposed to, because that's where we didn't even give security a tenure in any of the things we've done. Yeah. We've just left it to the market. Yes. And when you leave it to the market is actually performing exactly as it should.
The market is a wild bull.
It's too much. It's
there through the next field and the next field.
It's looking around going, listen, I reckon if we get rid of car parking spaces, we can actually fit a few more.
The 2 people who got together in this new politics, Barry Callan and Simon Coveney, when he was...
when they were negotiating.
Before he ran screaming from the Department of Housing, because he couldn't do anything. He didn't achieve anything. Was this incredible fudge where right now rents are fixed at 4% a year.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. And, there was no, fixture.
But basically what it was an upward only rent reviews.
Yeah.
Basically that's what they did. But we had the most...
But even the fixes in the housing crisis have been real panicky moves, because not only did you sell all of our, state-owned land to, companies firms that didn't want to develop or build a single house. At the same time, those who were building were now getting these extra kind of knee-jerk reactions from the Celtic Tiger era, making it harder and harder to make profit from building because, bedsits were now banned. Mm-hmm. Apartments had to be a certain size. This was Alan Kelly. And we all nodded along and said, yes, let's never have these kind of pyrite, shoebox apartments that we did during the Celtic Tiger era. But unfortunately, that just made it impossible to build anything in the city centre, which is why we're building 400,000 office spaces in the city centre and no houses or apartments for anyone to live in. So they're all going to be commuting on the already, stuffed Lewises and so on. Never mind trying to get companies to actually move in there in when there's no housing for anyone. So there was a kind of double issue. And I know in Dublin City Council are absolutely aghast because they've spent tens of millions, literally, closing down bedsits. So all of those units that were people who were on social housing were moved out, or maybe elderly people died or whatever. And it was 2 into 1 it was called. So they knocked 2 bedsits and turned into 1 apartment. And just as that had completed, that process was pretty much complete by the middle of last year, in it arrives Owen Murphy to announce, we're going to need bedsits again.
Yeah, co-living, communal living, he's calling them.
Well, the most handsome man in Ireland, Mel Reynolds, I was listening to him on the way in today, and Mel was saying that the housing statistics that they said they built somewhere over 700 social housing
780
is what they said, but the actual figure is half of that. So this is, and
the commitment is 25,000 a year.
And hang on, 3 weeks ago, Damien English said it was 17,000 were built. And that was what he said.
To be fair to him, he said 17,000.
Yeah.
So it is.
I remember, and then it was, and there was this figure 17,000 at the bottom of the page, and it was made up of, purchases that they bought, private houses, anything that was plugged into an electricity, anybody who turned on a meter, all of these ridiculous.
If you get into that kind of nitty gritty of how do you qualify housing, it does take away from the human problem.
Yes, and we're falling into the trap again.
But I think the country is divided on housing. When they think of the housing crisis, they automatically think it's homeless people getting free houses. So if you're down the country on a farm, or you're just like, if you're down outside Dublin, you automatically think that's all a load of kind of layabouts in Dublin want free houses. That's the way politicians want it to be, and that's the narrative at the moment. But they're not even solving the thing that affects most people, because we don't demand it, is, working people can't afford houses.
Mm-hmm. And that's the nub of it. If you're someone who's sitting there and in a 4-bedroom house in Glasnevin, and you're looking and going, my property price is going up, I'm okay. Yeah. But if you can't see beyond the fact that your kids are looking at, as you say, having to live beyond the long commutes into work or whatever, into possibly precarious work or whatever the new models are, and if you can't see beyond your own nose, which we quite frequently can't, people are busy and they're doing their own thing, it's very hard to make it real for them when you understand that actually, you know what, all you're doing is actually making trouble for yourself down the road.
But the repeal movement was led by young people, and they're the ones most affected by this. So even if you do get that, good job, to use a term that's quite a broad, if someone with a good job, and they're a couple, both with good jobs, should afford a house, but they can't in Dublin. I know GPs who are house sharing, in their late 30s, which is kind of mental. The GPs are supposed to be loaded. They're supposed to be living in the 4-bed, in any part of the city, but they're all renting and they're squashed into the city centre. And, This is a joyful podcast.
Yeah, well, if you're going to change anything about housing, you have to change the ethos that's there. I mean, homelessness is policy. You just got to see that it is policy.
That's the point, yeah. It's actually getting a national agreement on what the problem is. And
I think we know what the problem is. The problem is
doubled land. We doubled homelessness in the space of 5 years. And the biggest transfer of land ownership since the Land League has occurred in the same period.
Well, Mary McAuliffe, I think for me, and I think probably for you, Tony, as well, she put it best. We've always warehoused the poor in Ireland, and that's all they're doing now, is warehousing the poor. They're not getting rid of any problems. Putting people in homeless hubs doesn't get rid of problems. It simply creates problems further down the line. That's all it's doing.
I was writing about these family hubs last August, stupidly putting in the middle of the silly season, because when I discovered what it was, and particularly you've got the one down the road here in Croke Park, where the Archbishop of Dublin, if you get your Google Maps out, you can see it's pretty much
land.
The entire stretch opposite on the other side of Clonliffe Road. And what they did is they provided what used to be student accommodation, I think, for the Mater Dei or St. Pat's. And this turned into a family hub. So Dublin City Council moved into this wreck of a building, totally refurbed it at a cost of, I think it was 55 million. And they not only refurbed it for the Archbishop, the Archdiocese, we should say. Okay, he doesn't personally own it. The Archdiocese, they pay the Archdiocese rent to use it as a family hub for only 3 years. And when those 3 years are up, they hand the keys back.
Hand the keys back.
Entirely refurbed. So the Archdiocese gets this free building. They've earned rent on it, and it's been refurbed by the taxpayer.
And this is the same.
Beautifully ready to go for
this is the same organisation or Crime Inc. or whatever you want to refer to it as that still didn't pay over repatriations and recompense to the sufferers of Magdalene laundries. You're thinking about this.
Thank you, Michael Woods and Bertie Ahern.
Absolutely.
But when you think, somewhere in government, somebody said, "Oh, we've all these homeless people. What are we going to do? What's the best model we can come up with?" Fuck, that direct provision looks good. Let's do that for homeless people. And that's basically what they've done, is they've done direct provision for homeless people. And
all those family hub contracts are quite similar, 3 to 5 years. What happens when they, the idea was that we're building 25,000 houses a year, so by the time 3 years are up, all those people
but even the language, and we all buy into it, we all say family hubs. Now, where did family hub? There's nothing family,
word, isn't it?
There's nothing family or hub
it's
about it.
It's a lovely word, family hub. It's a lovely playground. Lots of bright colours. I think people will like that. Homeless people love bright colours because they're kind of hallucinating most of the time anyway on the boardwalk, which by the way was built by Fianna Fáil, so it's their problem. But what is the solution? Because if you do hoard all these people into family hubs and then, eventually give them a free home, nowhere along the line are we helping them to become independent.
I look at solutions.
And that's the aspiration that we should have, isn't it? Okay, let's look after the people who can't mind themselves because they're in a cycle of poverty. But you've got to break that cycle of poverty by giving them some kind of opportunities. Now, we've all these multinationals coming in. I've actually no problem with them paying very little tax in the end. But why, when the idea is sitting across the table from them, they're saying to, let's just not name one. Okay, random multinational. You're going to make billions. You're going to literally make billions. You can funnel it out of Ireland, do whatever you want.
Banana.
Would you mind just on the side building 200 houses here? You have the money. We're not going to tax you. It's a one-off thing. Put a school there. You know, just normal negotiations.
But this happened in the past.
The negotiations, it's still happening now, by the way. No, it's still happening. They're still doing, the idea is still going, look, we've educated this wonderful workforce, bring them all in, anyone with foreign language. Okay, we know, no one speaks languages in Ireland, so you're going to have to ship some of those in, grand. And what do we ask in return? Almost nothing. Literally just jobs. Yeah. And we don't even ask them for a certain quality of job. They just want to be there standing in a flashy building giving the speech.
Good photo op is important.
But we could ask them for what the clergy is getting or what the Archbishop is getting. We could ask them, build houses, you rent them out for 3 years and then hand us the bloody keys. Just do it in reverse.
But I was coming to a point, because we have this narrative, welfare cheats cheat us all, which is kind of Leo's legacy. That's how he won the Fine Gaelers over. Mm-hmm. And it is the idea that all these poor, dirty people are getting state handouts and they're just being helped all the time. Whereas if you look at the state handouts that cost taxpayers the most, you have the Apples, you have all of, like Apple, for example, wanted to build its data centre in Athenry. So the idea basically bought the land from Kielce, and they were holding the land, which was going to be sold to Apple once the planning process had gone through. Now, Apple weren't happy the planning was taking too long. We have to have all these rigours involved in planning because we were so corrupt for a long time. Basically, all you need to do was give someone an envelope and you got the planning. So there's a reason why you have all these, various barriers to get your planning too easily. So they're all state handouts all the time. How much do we spend protecting Shell's assets, off the west coast with our Garda time and resources when the country was closing Garda stations a few years later? And the fact that we give them the resource in the first place is absolutely ludicrous. There is non-stop handouts. There's handouts in the form of insecure tenants, insecure workers. Like the benefits actually go to these huge conglomerates.
We've allowed another narrative.
Hose out of Ireland.
We've allowed another narrative get away with it recently, whereby we bailed out the banks, we recapitalised the banks, we filled their balance sheets, we filled their boots with this money. We did with quantitative easing, which was hooking up markets to like a credit like fiends, and then we turn around, and now the banks are turning around saying, yeah, we need to sell our non-performing loans, and they'd already provisioned those loans. 2008, 2011, 2012. They took the provisions so they wrote them off as non-performing loans.
There's already. You
have to. You have to
pay tax for 20 years.
Exactly. So you've done that, and then we have to sell them. They're pulling us back. Yeah. But hang on, you gave me the money for it.
That's fine, and of course they're not really selling them. They're just handing them over to vulture funds, who then do the evicting and all the horrible work. And like if someone hasn't and refuses to pay any interest or engage with the bank in any way, they probably. They probably do deserve to lose their house in the end. But the bank should be doing it with all the kind of rights and laws that you have under Irish law. When you hand it over to a vulture fund, a lot of those rights disappear, and the bank, avoids the nasty PR of sheriffs knocking down houses.
That is sadly, a lot of that is actually an outsourcing
of the horrible business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have we heard that before in pretty much all the discussions we're having at the moment?
Yeah.
Outsourcing the issue to England. Outsourcing the kids to the boss.
You were saying about
that's not quite the same.
That social welfare cheat us all, and the figure that
social welfare cheat us all.
But if you want to get into the psyche of Fine Gael, if you look at that, ICTU have come out and said that bogus self-employment and precarious employment being abused is costing almost treble what social welfare claimant fraud is costing.
Yeah.
Yet the campaign they've come out with is it's on bus stops now. It's like could you be bogus self-employed? Have a little think about it. When you've had a little think about it, come back to us. Let us know. We'll put it into the mix. We'll have a little think about it, and then we'll decide what's going to happen. Instead of coming out and saying employers who cheat the system are social welfare cheats, they cheat us all.
Yes.
And it's that whole thing. We'll look the other direction. There's the poorest. We'll attack them. It comes back to
identify with people can picture the homeless person more than they can the multinational figure who's getting all the state handouts, the government handouts, because we don't know the individual shareholders of Google or Alphabet, whatever their parent company. You can't really picture them. We have kind of hoodied people wandering, but they're the workers.
I can picture. They look like Michael Noonan.
But you see, people do get angry when they get angry with the concept of poor shabby people hanging around town, destroying the sunny days with their tattoos and their cans of Linden Village. Do you know what I mean? There is that hatred. There is a kind of a...
He's laughing. I know. Do you know he's laughing?
That's what you do in the afternoon.
I'm literally looking at Martin going, he's just one tattoo away from that.
But there is that kind of hatred of the poor.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
dirty, sully, they ruin everything.
There was a great
they swear,
tweet.
they misbehave, they're vulgar, they're rude.
A great tweet for a party that creates poor people. Fine Gael sure hate them. You know what I mean? And he creates them and then hates them.
The poor get poorer and the rich get Fine Gael.
There is an element though that mindset has. Look, that's a long time of a mindset, but there is also the hope is, and the hope is, as you said, the young people, because if you have people between 18 and 35 in this country who are locked out of housing and in these things, they're actually then quickly becoming a voting bloc that needs to be addressed. And that's
because there's a huge voting bloc. Don't forget, they're sitting prettily, very happy with themselves.
Yes.
Houses are going up in value.
36%.
Yeah. So, but like you go kind of 50 plus bracket, you know, they're quite maybe even earlier than that.
It's 45 plus more or less. Because
that's a huge voting bloc.
And do you if you remember around 2008 that generation that was a 50 plus were called the Jagger generation, and they were all kind of and they all had, you know, they were kind of semi-retired. They had, you know, they'd maybe been used equity to buy a second house or a third house, and they went to New York, everything, and all the rest. And then we were all supposed to aspire to this. You know, everybody wanted to go to New York every Christmas for your Christmas shopping and buy a Land Rover then in January, and put it all on the credit card. But the lessons of the past, they haven't really. That generation that have come out of it, because they were landed, they were already. They've come out of it now and they feel a lot better about themselves. It is that up and coming generation that are coming out into the world now and saying, Jesus, you shafted me you cut my resources when I was in college, when I was in school, I struggled for a while and you paid me half the social welfare benefit then you gave me an unpaid internship, and now you're telling me that you took me on, that I'm basically paying rent to beat the band. That's a recipe for, I'm going to say revolution, but it's a recipe for political revolution.
You continue on the story then.
We also had, culturally we had a period of self-loathing as well for a good 10 years there. You know,
we deserved it, yeah.
We're a load of aegis, you know, we all partied and we're a crowd of idiots.
But the narrative has even moved on now, and the narrative is now you're going to work in the second most highest precarious employment in the world. There you are, you're in Ireland. Precarious employment is second highest only to the USA. And you can't retire till 68, the highest in the EU.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are taking the
But you can't get a pension till then, of course. Someone's going to make you retire long before that.
But they really
are.
It's
due to fill the gap.
Can you imagine 68 years of age?
But you know, the private sector kind of writes you off in your 50s.
Yeah.
You know?
So what are you going to do for that last 20 years?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
There is and
that's what the current people squeeze the rent have got to look forward to.
Yeah. This is the future, and it's laid out.
Have we got any optimism at all?
Well, I suppose the optimism is that once those kind of 45 plus age group today age off, okay, you're talking a long time away. Obviously, the politicians in the future are going to have to cater to what's coming up, and they themselves are going to have a generation that are out there now. You know, the present all are out there at the moment, struggling with rent. So I suppose it's probably going to change from that perspective, isn't it?
I think that,
and it'll be far, as we know from the repeal movement and everything, we can look forward to a far more open-minded society because. The younger people are astonishingly open-minded because they don't have the sort of baggage.
No hang-ups.
They broke all the stigmas and all the shames have been just literally thrown away, which is great, which is it's fantastic to see.
I still don't hold my partner's hand going up the street, Grafton Street or anywhere, because it's just built into me. You know, this fear of someone's going to attack you or think of you as a lesser, even though I'm embarrassing myself for having that feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
But because in Ireland today, nothing is probably going to happen.
No.
It just doesn't feel comfortable.
But we're of an age group where you know it was probably look at that, you know, whispers, you know, and
but any public affection would have been seen. Oh, there's something wrong with him. Somebody's holding somebody's hand. What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? We are that was more what we were grown up with, like public displays of affection.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, no, not really.
I don't know. My parents loved me, Martin. Whatever your problems were your problems.
Awful, isn't it?
Ashbourne.
Well, I'm not from there. I'm just The property market has forced me out that direction.
I forgot you're from Posh Farm in Dublin.
That's a low, that is. Back to showbiz. Go on and dish a little dirt. Who gives you most grief? Or do you get grief?
You see, probably not in the circle to get the grief. Do you know what I mean? I'm not bumping into them too often.
Yeah.
And I suppose who's going to be stupid enough to kind of complain to your face about it? They'll have to pretend they love it. And I think most of them, I think Callan's Kicks is actually a big hit in Leinster House, sadly.
I'd imagine
because they all want to know who is kind of been covered and who got slagged, and they can use that line against each other and so on. Because don't forget, the ones they dislike the most are their, fellow party people. That's why they it's across the parties is how they get friends and marry, because they're not rivals, they're not fighting in the same patch.
But that
and by the way, we've let Fianna Fáil away massively in this.
Oh, we have.
I never think of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil as separate teams. I mean, they're the core issue, They've
managed to fool the public though, to make them thinking that there's a oppositional government there.
We suddenly think, and the whole discussion is Fianna Fáil are the old world party that are irrelevant, and Fine Gael are this modern young people. And there's plenty of Fine Gael TDs who are staunchly opposed to this as well.
Listen, I'd love to one day to get the archive of the letter.
The media totally went on Fianna Fáil though, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Because it was more stark, perhaps, that there were a few front bench people.
The pose for that photo is probably going to be one of the greatest moments ever. Like that photo is going to come back all the time.
Where they were holding the three signs.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for someone to do the meme, but it's what is it? P is stored in the balls across.
No. Taryn DeVere put it up, and it was really funny. And they changed the sign. It was, which boob is the clitoris? That was just absolutely brilliant and summed it up perfectly.
There's definitely, right now, Fianna Fáil have a huge problem with women and young people, which obviously plays into into Fine Gael's favour, because we all, and again, the journalists covering and who'd failed to spot repeal movement have been talking all this time about, Fianna Fáil are creeping back up, because they're just thinking, okay, history's just going to repeat itself now, isn't it? So Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil will just swap power. It looks more like Fine Gael are kind of just becoming the new Fianna Fáil. They're just going to hold on there at all costs. But of course, Fine Gael still have cervical check scandal report to come. And those women are terminally ill. And when those sad stories reach their inevitable conclusions, then we're going to start out, and it's always the government of the day that will pay.
Well, you got to remember, and this is me going right out there and saying that I think Leo Varadkar has an empathy problem. I think it's been clear that, he had to, where we contrast him telling the story and showing that he was upset because he thought of his sister. And then you contrast to what actually, Emma McMahon was saying had actually happened to her the previous day about the state still fighting her on her individual case. So the difference there, it will reverberate, but I don't think people are going to find a home, particularly now when the energised youth are going to say, well, hang on, Fianna Fáil even voted 51%, 49% for no. It was on a knife edge, but nonetheless, Fianna Fáil supporters who were in the 4,000 people who were taken in the exit poll. That's how they admitted, So it's a sample, it's a poll, but nonetheless, it's a weather vane. I do think because
the young active people in repeal don't really seem to have anyone to vote for at the moment, isn't that?
Now, and I was talking a little about this during the week, and there's a narrative going out there now at the moment. Now, if you take, and I stand back a little, be objective, there is a movement who are now hardened activists. Some parties involved, cross-party. They pulled the parties in. The parties didn't pull them in. They pulled the parties in. And now they're saying, and which party should these people join? And it's like, okay, you've had your bit of fun. You've been out there. You've achieved something great with activism. Now everybody come on board. And as soon as you come on board, you become stale. As soon as you get on board, you become stale.
Unless you have a range of beliefs that you can kind of somehow, but I know what you mean. If you're a small drop entering a large ocean.
Well, you don't change parties from the inside. And Fianna Fáil is the exact example of that. In that
Stephen Donnelly specifically. Look how Fianna Fáil has shifted so, hard to the left since he joined.
Well, remember, who was it? George Lee thought that he could jump into politics and make a huge big change, and George left sitting in an office going, nobody's talking to me.
He would have actually fulfilled his public service commitment had he told anyone after the experience what went on and why he left.
Well, he
decided to say hardly anything.
No, he didn't say much.
He did say that
he made a statement.
Isolated.
I can't change anything. We're all doomed.
That was it.
I love how they've given them the agriculture and environment brief in RT just to troll him. So he's got to talk to farmers.
He certainly,
and then talk about climate change. The same brief.
he certainly seems to have been, whether it's
the world is coming to an end. Totally.
I liked that the
farting farmers.
I liked that they grouped agriculture and defence together. I thought that was really interesting.
That's right.
A very interesting move to have agriculture and defence.
The green berets will fight.
I'd say it's like the lads doing X Factor at judges' houses, and they're trying to look at the portfolios and they're turning over pictures and they're going, right, what do we give? And then they're going, everybody's going, I don't like him.
So if you are, sorry, to come back to our issue, if you're a young person who is really motivated by repeating, it's the first time you voted or cared about politics, now you want to can't wait to get into the next election. Who are you going to vote for? And housing is your number one thing, or, women's health after cervical check.
Well, I think you do it the same way as you did repeal, the same way as you did water. And it's all a continuum of the same kind of political movements. You start a movement and you force the parties into the movement rather than the parties telling the movement where it's to go. The movement says, no, this is what we expect as a nation.
So you're affecting the manifesto and the party.
You're dictating
the election manifesto, basically.
So if you take a lot of these people are floating.
I think if you were to turn around and actually convince a party to almost, and I said this to you yesterday, almost go single issue and say, I am going to tackle homelessness and housing as a one, I won't. And they can even bullshit all they want. They can say, I won't care about debt to GDP ratio that we say ties our hands, and I'm even going to tell the EU that I'm going to colour outside the lines on a couple of things because in the EU constitution there's nothing that stops a state doing something if once they declare an emergency they can act in the benefit of the citizens. And if you got a leader that said that, you could actually then very quickly galvanise a good bit of support because it would actually say to people, okay, it's only one big issue, but it's actually one thing that we can all agree, if we get the stories out there, if we talk about students who are couch surfing, you saw the one that was famously went away where a guy put up a thing in one of the offices in the Silicon Docks and says, I'm going on my 2 weeks holidays. Will anybody feed my cat? And about 12 people emailed him and said, I'll stay there because I'm actually sleeping on couches at the moment around. These are the real stories, and if we could get those stories to actually affect that, I think we could.
Well, the other thing we've got to, the idea that the state can't build a house for less than 360,000, we've got to get rid of that nonsense.
Yeah.
I like to look at stuff all over the world. And this week I ended up on the Amish house building, log cabin building. Okay. It's so interesting. They build in Montana, these log
It's like Monaghan, is it?
It's just colder.
Best look at the log cabin in Monaghan.
But they build in Montana, and the winters they get in Montana are absolutely awful. And they build these things to a very high standard.
You mean it's below 10 degrees?
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
And they can build them for a fraction of the price that we can put up a house in Dublin for. I'm thinking, why don't we just invite the Amish over and say,
but to be fair, American houses are just a pile of shit, aren't they?
Oh, but these were gorgeous.
Do you ever see those?
These were gorgeous.
There's a house fire and you're looking and there's just nothing left.
Yeah.
There might be a chimney. You're going, what was it built of? We built
having up the road here.
We built them out of blocks. And
in Ireland,
the Metro America happens up here during the summer.
The Metro Hotel.
But people in Ireland want, for obvious reason, want to live in
bricks and mortar.
Why though? We
didn't really catch on.
But we don't have those extremes of weather. We don't have those, we're not going to get hit by a hurricane.
It's a cultural thing, I think, isn't it? I think it's a cultural thing.
We do have
so many ruins.
We still have a terrible relationship, a psychosis with property and the need for bricks.
That hill, that's my hill. Don't look at that hill. That's my hill. Okay, I'm building on that hill.
But when you're
I'm going to put Dallas pillars on a bungalow. Everyone go away. I will have an asbestos roof. It's my privilege. That's my entitlement.
I will have a hot tub.
You don't understand how hard it was for P. Flynn to have two houses.
I was hiking in the Cotswolds last year.
Oh, very nice.
As easy as hiking works, it's lovely undulating hill. It's quite Monaghan-like. And I was looking around going, why doesn't Ireland look as pretty as this? Beautiful oak trees everywhere, big gaping open fields. All the houses look the same. There's no bungalows anywhere. And then I remembered, oh wait, the farmers here own like 16,000 acres. They didn't have a huge battle. And then once they did start, separating land by half acres and planting hedges all the way around them and then just building bungalows everywhere and like when a tractor stops, you just leave it in the field forever and the nettles grow around it and an ash tree grows out of it. Whereas in England, it's all beautiful rolling hills and nothing is touched. And it's kind of tragic after a while. And we realize, oh my God, all the houses really do look the same. And they were pretty at the beginning, but now it's like, you feel like screaming and running away. Much like they do in those lovely period dramas. When someone takes off in July and they goes, I'm leaving now! And they run off for the afternoon. And because it rains, they're dead by lunchtime the next day. I have been rained upon. I shall have a quick fever where I will confess to all my horrible truths and then die upon the pillow.
They died of consumption.
She wore the dress, not the fever dress.
Yeah,
she's now carrying
talking about
15 gallons of water.
What are you heading for this summer, or have you anything on for this summer?
I should go walking somewhere to lose my radio fat. I probably should stick to Ireland this time and have a look at the miserable old stories around the country.
And have you any events coming up, or?
I'm doing the Dorky Book Festival.
Oh, very good.
On the 16th of June, I think it is. It's on a Saturday night.
It's such another world, isn't it?
It really is another world, yes. And they're utterly aware. But I think it's a kind of a village where one half of them have kind of, are dreaming. One of them have won the Euro Millions and the other half are kind of bitter that they haven't.
Yeah.
And they kind of clash together and they shop in the same
it's
fish
the kind
bowl.
of place you just can't wear a hoodie around. You know? Just a hoodie on the high street.
And make sure you drive one of those Porsche Cyan, is it SUVs?
Oh yeah.
Fill up the main street.
He says Cyan, I'd have called it a Cayenne, but this is a north-south thing. I have no idea now.
Probably is a Cayenne. They even say Audi around there. Instead of Audi.
Audi. No.
Audi.
Oh, well, I would imagine it's one of those higher, if you were to literally say drop in and say, do you remember we used to have the highest instance of helicopter ownership in Europe at one stage,
That's right.
Yeah. I'd love to do a Tesla test now, because the Teslas are popping up everywhere,
My favourite thing is seeing a Tesla which has a paper parking ticket on the dashboard. So they're it's the kind of middle-aged man who goes, I'm a tech person. I've got an electric Tesla with the iPad as the dashboard.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to use the parking app.
Yeah.
With coins in the machine.
I was looking at one of them that crashed into a cop car in the States yesterday. I'm just like, can't wait till they turn on screen.
Is it a self-driving?
Yeah. Self-car, It starts.
It has begun.
It has begun.
Skynet is here.
Yeah.
What was the the AI thing they turned on last year, and it started talking back to them, and then they went, okay, we don't know what that code is. Turn it off.
No, yeah, they linked some AI stuff together, and they were letting it talk to each other. It's such a great idea, of course, linking AI stuff together.
Wow.
So they linked it together, and initially, the two systems started talking with each other, and everybody's watching this going, oh, that's great. And then all of a sudden, they started talking in language that they didn't understand. They were communicating beyond what humans, and that sometimes, maybe we better unplug this.
I wonder, had the scientists trying to find the language, had they been to Kilgarvan, and maybe there was a kind of a
I have this
origin.
I have this belief that the only two jobs in the future, the only two jobs that are going to be in the future, making robots and killing them.
The killing thing is good, isn't it? But you're going to be killing them with other robots, so they'll eventually take over.
There'll be good robots and bad robots.
We're going to kill them. How can you do that? A drone. That's a robot. Is it? No, a drone is not a robot. A robot has moving hands.
Why do we have our first robot t-shirt?
Oh, well, I thought we already...
Besides Leo.
We had that there for 6 years in the end. Thank you.
Oh, you should have been here yesterday.
I was in Amstrad Taoiseach.
He
got my load.
He brought a can of lilt in yesterday. That's all.
Chips in his hand. Oh, it's a tin of lilt.
There's a little shop here, just around the corner.
Oh, they sell that totally tropical taste, pineapple and grapefruit crush.
And I don't see
it turns me on something else. I love the Bobcast. Well done on the Bobcast. EchoChamber. Would they be a relation of Lisa Chambers over there in Mayo?
Jack Chambers more or least than Lisa.
They always have these cool Web Summit names, don't they? Echo Chambers.
We'll have to show me.
Young Epper Chambers. What's the Irish name? Yes, EchoChamber. What's the Irish for Echo? Go! Chamber.
You met him, of course, didn't you?
Yeah. It's actually years since I met Enda. But who's really met Enda?
Yeah, you know, it's hard to...
Everybody
I mean, like, existentially, have you met him?
Yeah, no.
Who is Sonny Landon? Come on, no,
That's exactly
he
how he
communicates
is.
by a fist bump.
Oh, yeah, he's
But he
that...
doesn't fist bump to your shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
Look, he did.
He's a thing.
He did such a.
But remember how I was worshipped in Europe? I was going to get a big job in Europe 1 year later.
Oh, yeah, got shafted there
Nothing,
big time.
nothing yet.
He was going to be head of the EU Commission.
I wouldn't want to be on the board of the underground car park bottle bank. That's what we put on the executive board.
Actually, there's some positions coming available in I&M at the moment, so...
That kind of shake-up might be one of the benefits as well for Ireland. On a serious note, like it's the biggest media group. I mean, it's quite a shake-up.
Potentially. Sadly, there's probably going to be job losses, but if they get a benefit...
Yeah, but that's across the board in media, isn't
yes,
it? You go
it
past
is.
the Irish Times building yesterday, I was thinking, how are they going to sustain this building even? Never mind.
I think it'd be really awful if Eno Doherty wasn't writing for the end of
No.
I think it would just be awful.
No. That's another discussion we didn't get into, which is kind of this whole, should the Ione Institute be allowed to exist in a pure media from now on?
No, and I saw...
but aren't you a liberal?
No.
Yes, I agree there. I agree they should have access to a platform. That doesn't mean that they should be listened to.
Yeah, but no, the difference is, the people who voted no should be heard from. But why suggest that the Ione Institute...
Are representative of 33%.
Lowlec Limited trading as the Ione Institute should be the representatives of those people. They don't run for election because it's a private limited company. We don't know where their money is coming from. The people who are in there certainly don't come cheap because you've got David Quinn, Brito O'Brien, who are well-known columnists, Maria Steen, who's a trained barrister. You hope they wouldn't work for cheap anyway. Those people need to be heard from, but I suppose they'll just vote for the no voting Fianna Fáil TD. That's their voice.
But there was
I saw a very interesting little exchange that went on, and another one of those marginal voices that has a much bigger footprint than it should have is Hibernia Forum. And one of the stalwarts of Hibernia Forum was, why are you all picking on Iona? And I was going, you're feeling the heat, aren't you? Yeah.
But of course, it always connected to what I was saying about I&M and the squeezed media because the resources are tighter. So if you've got a researcher who's not been paid very well and has very little time to prepare for a program, they do tend to just go for the obvious one. This is an issue about the gender pay gap. Who's kind of against against gender pay equality for some reason.
I'm convinced they just turn around.
Call up the Ione Institute. It's easier,
Yeah,
because who else are you going to have?
Terry Prone.
Or the Catholic bishops.
Or Ivan Yates.
So, who are wonderful people who had
the
best
Ivan.
But Ivan hosts shows, but
he's totally objective, isn't he? On PAI rules. What the actual fuck?
You have to laugh, but you're right, because there's a reason a podcast like this is doing okay, is because people are going, look, I'm sick of hearing from the same 12, 13 people, we'd a laugh. We mentioned Mel Reynolds again, but we'd a laugh. We said to Mel, he came on, he had a chat, and then he was on Morning Ireland or whatever it was, and we said, congratulations, Mel, you're at the bottom rung of the Irish media level. By
the way, you're talking about podcasts, and everyone needs sponsorship in podcasts in order to keep it going, because you're providing content for free, which presumably iTunes is probably making money out of. And this is the whole area of influencers who think, we're self-employed and we're our own people. They're just providing content for a platform that makes all the money, and the only way they make money is if the platform decides to give them a few quid back, and be it YouTube or Facebook or any of these companies. I was making a point there about
sponsorship.
About sponsorship. I was talking to a corporate recently about sponsorship and just asking, because Callan kicks us up for sponsorship all the time as well. And, I was talking about the difficulty we have attracting it. And he basically said, well, because you've had so many issues like George Hook, making a balls of things, and sponsors running away frightened. And most of his colleagues, and this is chief executive level of big brands in Ireland, are kind of had these discussions in marketing institutes and so on, that it's best to sponsor a thing and a movement rather than a person, in case that person turns out to be, grabby grab hands or make stupid comments like George Hook did. We're not suggesting George Hook was grabby grab hands. He was the stupid comment version. So they're kind of, or Roseanne Barr. Yeah. They're frightened of this. So that's why podcasts are suffering as a result of the bad behaviour of people in traditional media. Isn't that kind of...
It does, but like when you think of, you think of the Blind Boy podcast and the numbers he churns out. Like he has 120,000 per week.
I would have thought an easy sponsor, no problem there.
And can't pick up sponsors.
Is that because we're kind of maybe still a little bit slow or still a little bit early in the evolutionary process?
We are in Ireland, absolutely. Yeah. Like we're late adopters to the medium.
But maybe as a does anyone not remember around 2007, 8, 9? Podcasts were huge for a time, and then just seemed to disappear until maybe 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, it became. But
Ricky Gervais, remember his big XFM thing? I remember listening to podcasts all the time, and we had Nomination on Jerry Ryan's show. And we were doing massive numbers, even though they were only just 3-second sketches, and then it just seemed to drop off a cliff.
John Waters calling
Dunphy
bollocks.
No, please come back. I'm a no bother. That was my favourite part.
That was.
Why you leave that bit in? That's kind of the most revealing thing.
That's what I thought was amazing.
I know, John. My friends. Yeah, go play. Go back to me. No. And he kind of, John Waters speaks like he's got his hand over his mouth. Oh, you fucking bum. Go and play with Una Milani instead. I hate you.
But that probably introduced more people to podcasts than anything else that has happened recently. More people have tuned in and said, "What's a podcast? Oh, you mean I can get that for free? It's on my phone.
It's already on my phone."
Why aren't I listening?
Do anything. But I've got to press that button and subscribe and then find the app again. That's too much.
And you hear your man asking me to leave a review, the cheek of him back.
And iTunes make it difficult to leave a review. Like, you can't just say like. You have to go through this whole 3-step
process. The first person to leave a review on Callan's Kicks is still the top one, and he just gave a 1 star and said, "This guy's gone downhill since the Knob Nation days."
What an arse.
And it's there. 2013 is the top review you see. And I go, what? He was probably right in 2013, but we're better now. We've got good writers.
Did you see the Vincent Brown tweet during the week where some guy had a go at Vincent Brown goes, "I'll never watch your show again." And
that was fantastic. That was fantastic. Tired. I also, because of the way Vincent Brown speaks, I always assume that he probably can't type. Typing couldn't possibly keep up with his mind. So I'm always kind of suspicious of Twitter. Is Twitter so neat and well thought out? Yeah. I go, is that Vincent Brown?
But he's probably broken 3 iPads getting that tweet, bouncing them off walls.
He's gone over the hedge, Vincent. He'll forever be the hero. And they all stood by the house. What was the name of the big fancy house?
Oh, that's right.
And Vincent just looked around at all the journalists just standing outside as if there was an invisible, and he just,
Irish journalist. Yeah, why are you standing over there? Come in here, for God's sake! And you hear this kind of shuffling of gravity. Can we? They're all looking at each other. He says, "Get him in here, for God's sake!"
Sorry.
What are you all sitting out here?
It's like the guy that goes around the back of the bike sheds, has the smoke, and he's looking at the rest of them going, "What's the fucking problem?"
Oh, no. No, look, Oliver, really appreciate you coming in.
I know it's called the EchoChamber, but you could put more cushions in to kind of stop the bounce.
Yeah, I know.
Would that defeat the purpose? And maybe sit close to the microphone. Or monitor it with a pair of headphones.
But you see, it's a chat. We like to have a chat. That's the difference.
You get me a sponsor who'll pay for foam, right?
We have beautiful microphones here. Just sit beside them.
We're still waiting on the George Soros.
I have a great, my studio, my dad did for me, when I started Callan's Kicks. Actually, we didn't have the Callan's Kicks contract at that stage. It was wishful thinking, so I got into this little, and the soundproof we use is carpet underlay. It comes in different colours, so you can make it look pretty as well. So literally hammered some insulation behind it, covered it with carpet underlay. It looks quite cool.
Well, the ambition is
you don't even need to do that wall, by the way. Just one wall, the big wall here.
It makes it sound like this is a tiny little room, guys.
Yeah, but that wall you could do.
Yeah.
Carpet underlay.
It's like
I sent my father up.
Do you remember the old pirate radio stations? And they used to have all sorts of stuff. Like, I used to know a few pirate radio stations. They used to have egg cartons and all of this stuff up on the walls.
It's quite sophisticated though, wasn't it? I did my journalism thesis on pirate radio.
Did you?
And literally a few months later, they kind of
I used to live not far from one, and we could actually hear it on the toaster. Mm. It was great. You could hear on the toaster.
Phantom FM was big in my day.
Phantom, yeah. They only closed.
Only
closed. Was it last year? They gave up the ghost.
Isn't it sad when it became commercial? And
that's the bloody internet got rid of them.
I think so. Yeah. And ironically, if they had just been let pirates, they probably would have existed fine on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
On their own independently. Is it Pete Maher?
Like you can have any radio station you want now on the internet. Nobody can stop you.
But it was also the fact that it was a pirate station that everybody knew was coming out of Whelan's. You know?
Actually, that's got to be. I think we have a collaboration here now. We can. You can do different voices. Me and Martin can pretend to be other people, and we'll do a far right. We'll do a far right.
We're in Pascal's constituency, and we haven't mentioned him. We haven't brought him up, and as the only person in cabinet who reads books and probably listens to podcasts, I'm delighted to be here, and you've done a wonderful job. But you're selfish. You have a room here that could house a homeless person, and you're using it for podcasting. So, practice what you preach. Thank you very much.
His soul is just so sold, isn't it? It's just,
Excuse me.
He is just throwing it all.
No, you're forgetting Pascal sold his soul before he went into politics.
Oh yeah, he gave Diageo first.
Procter & Gamble was it? Yeah, Procter & Gamble.
Procter & Gamble, yes. Very big job.
But there is something about Pascal, I must say, that's different to the other blue shirts, do you not think?
There is.
See, I think Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are all the same. For every blue shirt, you think blue shirts are all the privileged rich ones, but then you look at Jim O'Callaghan, and you go, the barrister who has represented Dennis O'Brien, so many, like, what? Willie, what's his name? I kind of forgot his name.
Willie O'D.
Willie O'D, Jesus Christ. Who has, like, oil and mining interests.
Yeah.
But that's
but then you look at Noonan, and he has investments in everything.
Sorry, who?
Noonan.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's your consummate investor.
Yeah. It's incredible when we're talking about, Bridget Cole and all these things, and you realise how long Michael Noonan's been around. He's been involved in the 1983 amendment.
He managed to leave office with 4 open investigations into that his name was attached to.
Yeah, there were good ones. There were good meaty ones. I was shitty inquiries the last time I was in office. They were good kind of big fuckers.
You must miss his voice.
Yeah, you do. It was kind of a massive overnight thing. But you see, when you're doing satire and you're stuck with real life as your sitcom characters, you do wish for that kind of upheaval. And although pretty much nobody changed in cabinet overnight, it went though from up the road and mind the dresser sort of bucko culchy sort of fished with Michael Noonan himself and a little bit of Alan Chatto creeping in every now and again to, this kind of cool totes and baseballs kind of, emoji cabinet.
Oh, we have a llama ready to go on the wall.
Wasn't an alpaca at the end? Who cares? I came across so cool that time, let's face it. And the first time I touched a dishwasher, remember it set the country wild.
Put the spoon in the dishwasher. Oh, Jesus.
It's worth looking at Justin Trudeau's performance in Canada at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
His approval rating.
Yeah.
Heading for Brian Callan levels. Maybe not quite Brian Callan.
But it does show you because you again coined the phrase, I'm Bertie popular, was it?
That's right, yeah. He got to Bertie levels.
It got to Bertie levels. But that's...
I'd say the next opinion poll probably was put him back up there again.
It was an interesting point someone made that he was staring quite...
malevolently at Simon Harris?
Yes. Didn't like the...
Who would have thought?
Didn't like Simon Harris becoming a heartthrob.
He kind of let Simon Harris be the face of it for the difficult part of the campaign, and then when the numbers start swinging, so I have to be out here doing it.
See, there's a long summer ahead, and now I know if I was Leo Varadkar right this minute, I'd do the whole get the legislation through overnight fast as I could and call an election.
Overnight in Ireland, by the way, is a year.
No, they can do it in one night to sovereignize banking debt, so they can do it in one night.
The regime has to start. It's not as if, a doctor can perform the procedure the following day.
Yeah, no, but what we could do, and here's my prediction, and I'm going to make the prediction. They're going to turn around and they're going to offer an extension of the confidence and supply arrangement agreement with Fianna Fáil, which the Fianna Fáil might pre-repeal would have looked like no way. Now they've got to look at it.
Oh God, give us another 2 years so we can put distance between ourselves and
the disaster that is. But I think Leo would be crazy then, because I think he could then manufacture a reason to fall out over the negotiations of the extension of it, and understand that
which he did the last time. Let's forget. Ironically, although Simon Coveney got a bashing in the early part of this podcast, he was the guy who negotiated.
He did,
because Leo went in and upset everybody. And it was even, they kind of trolled Fianna Fáil by having it in Trinity College as well. Back at my home turf,
Trinners for winners.
Willie O'D probably just knew where Guineas was, Where's this in relation to Guineas now?
but I think that's where we're headed, and I think we really.
Jesus, the cafe Kyleborn is closed down. An outrage.
But I think Fine Gael, and you're right about the next poll. Fine Gael are going to see the support at the highest level they've seen it, but that's their zenith. That's as far as they're going.
I think they've already reached that peak because, again, as we said, human story is what kind of informs the electorate like none other. And the cervical check thing has not gone away by any means. Yeah. And I would suspect that other cancer checks have similar problems.
We've seen it. Well, we've seen there's some issues with mammograms at the moment. It was in the newspapers last week. So that's a development.
Can we be honest and say honestly, if we didn't think that the referendum was going to take place, that the government probably would have fallen, or at least been in a real crisis mode.
If there was no referendum, the government would probably have collapsed. Yeah. But you have to kind of wonder about new politics as well, and all those people who didn't want. Yeah. Like Shane Ross and the Independent Alliance wanted to get to that May deadline.
I was going to say they've got it now.
They've just got it now, haven't they? Yeah, they've got the pension.
Congratulations, you're all.
Thank you very much. Now we're out of here. Call the show bonk immediately, forthwith. I might even have a lemonade shandy to celebrate elderflower lemonade. It'll be quite a wonderful thing. Wonderful to be here in the north side of Dublin.
Has anybody ever been such a? I mean, he was just such a disappointment.
Wonderful minister. Very good in opposition.
He was a better op-ed
Who would
writer.
have thought that an Sun Independent columnist, formerly a stockbroker, would turn out to be so unreforming? Astonishing, really. Wow. Didn't see that coming.
I love the whole Brazil thing. That really
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, things happen so fast. I mean, he was on his way to Brazil. The North Korea thing. That has to be the best.
We forgot about that.
That has to be the best.
Well, that was John Halligan, wasn't it?
Shane Ross, John Halligan.
John Halligan with the lovely Waterford Waterford's Willie O'D. That was my favourite description. I don't know who was on Twitter, but we should credit them another time, who described John Halligan as, he looks like Harvey Keitel playing Willie O'D in a movie.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
That was one of those ones where I go, damn! Why didn't we come up with that?
Oh, you will. You will.
You were stealing that one as well.
2 or 3 months from now.
That was fantastic.
There's no institutional memory anymore. It's all gone.
So you're in a bit of a panic that there is an election and there's new faces.
We love elections. We're in a panic if an election happens and they're not on air.
That's what I was going to say.
Politics doesn't return until October. But then last year we started an election in February. And we thought, great, we're going to be here for the 12 weeks when they're setting up the government and everything. And in the 12 weeks, there was no government formed by the time we had finished.
And when you do, because I think of, you think of the lads in South Park are writing an episode, and it's got to be topical, so something happens, and they can literally churn out. You have to do that quite often. I'm sure you have sketches written in advance, but then there's maybe there's that 45-second sketch that's something that happened in the last 24 hours.
We don't tend to write too many sketches in advance because it is so topical.
Yeah.
What the kind of team works for is to set up that kind of format that anything can work. That's the kind of one that can run, like Simon Coven. He goes into a shop and he doesn't know what to do with himself type thing. And we had Leo's press conference where he just doesn't answer any of the questions. And we also got a dig at the kind of political correspondents who don't want to ask him any of the questions either, because it makes it harder for them to have to do stuff. Right. So you kind of, if you have the nice kind of frame there, then you can insert the topical stuff.
Well, the cabinet meetings, I love the cabinet, or the meetings, the political meetings where you might have, I love those. I absolutely love them.
No. I actually miss, and I'm in a minority of one here, the kiddie corridor was actually always, I enjoyed that. It was always.
That was kind of the culture of a servant in the end of culture era, so now it's kind of wouldn't fit with the.
Oh, I get that.
The Leo Towson Maze walls.
Yeah.
We had John Concannon doing that for a while. I like it. Wow. And then we were kind of going, oh, look, it's been closed down. It's like, oh, but he was such a good character and such fun.
And you know where he's been sent
work
to?
Out for the better.
Do you know where John's working?
No,
John is now representing Ireland in the UN, trying to get us a seat at the
Security Council.
Council.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Very interesting.
Because he's a marketing guy, whereas that's very much public affairs lobbying kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, very much. And
he's a very charming and likable character.
Everybody,
but all you have to do is
in marketing, they think he's a god.
But all you'd have to do is put up those big wide shots of the wide left.
But you see, there was a place for John Concannon, who was very good at that marketing spiel when it's kind of broad and you're selling Ireland, as a concept. I just never made sense to me why somebody like that would now have the job of kind of selling government and what the government is doing as opposed to, broad marketing. It wasn't really his forte. Do you know what I mean? He's not PJ Mara.
Yeah.
It's kind of the role they're trying to create.
But Alistair Campbell came in with Blair and sold everything. The first
Cameron was a PR guy himself.
Yeah.
I always think that because Leo is quite socially awkward and quite taciturn, that, John Callan is larger than life, he's very bubbly and he's good crack and he's got that gummy thing going on. That Leo kind of saw that and said, I want that. I want that to be me. So get him. Just get him, Mr. Fraser, sir.
But all he has to do to get that seat is put out those shots of the Atlantic, and then just put a little submarine going along the side and saying, we can do submarines.
Oh, I like it. Where does Liam Neeson's voice fit into all this?
It would be funny if it wasn't true. £500,000 on
it's got a whispery girl who does the AIB ads. She's cool.
Well, I'd say you're going to miss John Concannon, but I don't think there'll be a deficit of
no, we're working
material
now on portraying Pascal as the kind of malevolent force.
Yeah, that's
looking
starting
at all of those people.
I've a little tip for your new voices coming up, for the new voices after the general election. We've had most of them on here already, so just listen to the back catalogue and you can work on it.
With that echo thing, though. That's
right.
Okay.
Listen, Oliver, I really appreciate. Yeah, we will
let you go back to.
How long were we talking nonsense there?
1 hour and 24 minutes, folks.
What?
Yeah, I told you.
I thought there was so much bile in
without the cans, without all the crap that goes with the normal studio, you can just have a normal chat, and they do tend to be long.
What it sounds like, though.
Listen, guys, do hit subscribe, do share, do leave us a review. We appreciate it. We rely on you guys. Thanks so much. Bye bye.